I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Kia Stinger, hailed by many as a replacement for the Holden Commodore and Ford Falcon, but perhaps it's a cut price alternative to the Audi A5 Sportback given its form factor. But we're going to get into all that in just a minute, and we're going to discuss this updated 2021 Kia Stinger and see what's changed on it and whether or not it's a good option to consider for your family. So what's changed about the 2021 Stinger? Well, it's blink and you miss it from the outside because the car looks rather similar. There's this new set of 18-inch wheels on this 200S base model, and the GT gets some new 19-inch wheels as well. As for the front, you get some slightly more aggressive looking LED signatures and tail lights as well. But this 200S is definitely writing some checks it can't cash. These fake vents here on the bonnet aren't exactly to my tastes, but there are a couple of real vents down the side here, down the strakes of the car, which is always nice to see. But what's the Kia Stinger like on the inside? Well, good news, because adding to the base model $2,500 in price has brought some extra nice appointments in here, and it all feels pretty good. There is a general air of quite a lot of quality in this vehicle, almost on par with the Germans, but given its less expensive price of $53,000 here in Australia, there are some compromises. They're not in the technology department really though, because this 10.25-inch touchscreen is very crisp and has standard navigation from this model. You of course get wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, and it works really nicely. The shortcut buttons are slightly strangely placed down here on this silver center stack, and there are shortcuts for the climate control which runs through that infotainment system as well. So it's all pretty easy to wrap your head around. In front of me here, I've got two analog dials and a TFT central readout screen that gives speed, and it also responds to whatever drive mode you put it in here with this little dial down in the center stack. You've got a nice leather covered steering wheel, and you can adopt a really nice driving position here. It's quite low and quite long, very much a Germanic driving position, and it suits tall guys like me really well. And the steering wheel's also got buttons for controls and all that sort of good stuff. As for what you get above this car by going up to the GT line in the 200S or the GT, for a little bit more money you do get a better sound system and a nicer set of appointments, but there's nothing to be sniffed at. You do get Nappa leather, where these seats are just basic leather for Kia, though they're quite comfortable. There's no under thigh support adjustability, but they are electrically adjusted without memory function. The more expensive models get that, as well as a sunroof. So all in all, it's a pretty comfortable place to be, and for practicality, things are okay. There's two different size cup holders. One's good for a really small bottle or a coffee cup. The other one has a slightly larger aperture there for storing bottles like this one. And you've got a nice, very slick forwards and backwards kind of, again, quite Germanic in style, covered storage space. No wireless phone charging on this example. You get that in the GT. There's lots of piano black here, which I know a lot of you guys don't like, and definitely shows up a lot of fingerprints, and a quite shallow but quite big center armrest storage with a little tray for your phone. So the Kia Stinger is pretty well set up. You've also got two USB ports and a 12-volt socket. The front seat feels a really nice place to be. Lots of soft touch materials here on the door and the dashboard, and pretty well screwed together. So let's see how spacious this is for a family in the back. By jumping around, opening this rear door with quite an aggressive slope to the window. Doors open nice and wide, and much to photographer Chris's amusement, the windows do indeed go all the way down. They don't stop halfway up like some cars do. And back here, space is pretty capacious. Now, as you might know, I'm 6'2", and if I sit up directly straight like this, my head does touch the ceiling. That would be worse with the panoramic glass sunroof, but if I sit with a little bit of a slouch to my position, I've actually got decent enough headroom there. And behind my own pretty far back driving position, I've got generous knee room, and you've got a map pocket, and you've got enough toe room to be fairly comfortable. There's a lot of visibility in the back here, and being quite a wide car, there's a real space of airiness. Though, unfortunately, while the width of the middle seat might be good, there's a really big hump in the floor for the drivetrain, so you're not going to be seating 5 people in here in any real amount of comfort, but 4 will be supremely comfortable. You've also got these really nice adjustable aircon vents with a sort of attempt at climate control back here, so cold to hot, 12-volt socket, USB charging port, and you get soft touch materials here on the door, as well as this leather appointment which continues down to the armrest. Door bins, which are big enough for a sort of 500ml bottle, which isn't too bad in my book. And you've got a central armrest with two cup holders that's nice and sturdy, doesn't flop down like a cheaper car might. You've also got ISOFIX ports on both outboard seats, so Your kids in the back here will be really comfortable, I reckon, and they'll feel pretty luxurious because it is a nice place to sit with good visibility outwards. So let's see if that continues to the rear of the Stinger. And we find it's a pretty unique party piece. It's not like some of the other vehicles that you get around this price point, and it's certainly not like Commodores or Falcons of old, because it's got a hatchback, which is really neat. And it means you've got a really broad aperture to access everything you need to. Being a low car, the slightly protrusive load lip doesn't matter such a lot. You do get 404 litres of cargo space, which isn't huge for the class, but as you can probably see, the space is very, very usable. You also get some tie-down points and some really nice feeling carpeting and a general feeling of sturdiness to the boot. Under the floor, you do get a space saver spare tyre as well, which is a nice little bit of, confidence inspiringness if you're a country buyer. But yeah, fold the seats down and you can super easily fit a road bike or a mountain bike in here. Now, the only thing I will complain about is the weight of the boot. I don't complain about this much, but the GT does offer a powered tailgate, which just makes this thing a little bit more usable and easy for someone who's not as tall or is a little bit lower on strength. So all in all, the Stinger is a very practical car and would easily carry a family, but how does it drive out on the road? So we're out here up in the Hunter Valley, just north of Sydney, on a road that should really suit the Kia Stinger. And as a good thing, it does. So what's the rest of the Stinger like to drive though? Well, the updates have pretty much extended only to cosmetic or interior changes, though we will come back to the updated safety features a little bit later on. We're going to start by talking about the same engines that were equipped before. So this 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine makes 182 kilowatts and 353 newton meters, and it's a fine engine. It's actually the same engine with the same outputs as you find in the Hyundai i30N, where it has a lot more theatre and a lot more character to it. In this sort of toned down variation, it's a little bit, it doesn't feel quite as powerful as it is in the i30N. That's a lot down to the weight of this car as well, which is 1.7 tons or thereabouts. So it's a pretty weighty vehicle, and unfortunately it just doesn't motivate this car with enough sort of vigour. You can of course opt for the 3.3 litre turbocharged V6, which is the topic of most of the Stinger's praise is that engine, because it produces 274 kilowatts and 520 newton meters now. The eagle-eyed of you will be aware that that is up 2 kilowatts on before. Pretty small change, but it shows that they're still correcting the engine. That's all hooked up to an 8-speed torque converter automatic. That's the only option for this car. They have solved the annoyance that the Kia Stinger had initially, where you couldn't really keep it in manual mode for very long, which was pretty frustrating, to be honest, quite a lot of the time. But now it'll let you stay in manual mode for as long as you want, and then to pop it back into drive mode, you just pull the lever backwards. When it is in drive though, it's a little bit of a lazy gearbox. It doesn't give kickdowns as crisply as you'd want in either comfort mode or sport mode, and it just feels like it's a bit slow on the change and a bit slurry. When it's in manual mode, these nice sort of metal feeling paddles do a good enough job of switching through the gears, and it does obey your commands pretty well. But yeah, it's not the greatest gearbox in the world, certainly not as good as the ones in the Germans. Of course, the Stinger is rear-wheel drive. It's one of the other great things about this car and why it was heralded as the replacement for the Commodore and the Falcon. So what does it drive like? Well, let's get up to speed and find out, because actually the Stinger is pretty impressive. And it's always been impressive, but the subtle tweaks that have been made to it throughout its life have made it a more complete vehicle out on the road. So this base model car gets only passive suspension. The GT and the GT line get adaptive with 3 settings that are linked up to the drive mode. But the passive setting isn't bad, not at all. It's a little bit firm around town and at lower speeds, perhaps a little firmer than some people would like. For those people who are more used to a Camry, say, with its really plush ride, this is going to feel quite firm. But the trade-off is that out here on some good country roads, it remains better in control. It's never really harsh or crashy though around town, and it's, yeah, a nicely set up suspension system, I'd say. It resists body well pretty well too, although the weight of the car, as mentioned before, does get in the way of quick cornering prowess, especially with this 2-litre engine. If you turn it in too fast, it kind of just falls a bit into understeer. It's a pretty neutral car otherwise, the Stinger. It doesn't terribly woefully plow understeer, but there's definitely a bit of front engine standard understeer that you get at the mid corner, which with the 3-litre, well, with the V6, you'd be able to correct that with a good stab of the throttle, but unfortunately this 4-cylinder car just doesn't have enough power to bring the rear drive balance into play enough to make it a really fun car, at least in my opinion. But if you think otherwise, then let me know in the comment section down below. Now, it has been raining a little bit here in Sydney while this car's been on test, which is unusual, and there you can feel that the chassis is quite pliable and a really enjoyable car to drive, really, but without being sort of supreme or outstanding. And it certainly settles into a nice gait on a nice open country road like we're on at the moment. Its steering, in comfort mode at least, is pretty nice, pretty accurate, but in sport mode it's just overly heavy and a bit disgusting. So I've set up custom mode to have comfort steering with sporty throttle response for the gearbox as well. And yeah, that's how I like to drive my Stinger. Now, noise, vibration, harshness, suppression, there's nothing that rattles in the cabin, you'll be glad to know, because that's something that, well, you'd be worried about if you didn't know much about Kias at the moment, but they've definitely kept it all well screwed together. There's no real unpleasant rattling noises going on. However, the road noise isn't perhaps as well suppressed as it could be on really coarse chip surfaces like we were just on. You probably heard a little bit of that roar, but at this price range you're not expecting limousine quality, and you can at least turn the sounds of nature on over the top to drown out any of those unpleasant noises if you wish. Our personal favourite is the rainforest, though I get the feeling that that feature is going to be used about 5 times before everyone forgets about it and thinks it's a gimmick. Still, maybe you like it. Again, let me know down below. As for urban usability of the Stinger, it's a pretty wide vehicle. It can be a difficult car sometimes to thread through narrow streets around Sydney, although at least the visibility forwards is pretty good and you can judge where the car is nicely. The rear 3/4 being a sportback kind of hatchback body style, there's a lot of metal going on back there, which does get in the way a little bit of visibility, especially in the reversing sort of scenarios. You do get a standard reversing camera on this car, and the GT line does get a 360-degree around view monitor with front parking sensors as well. This car just has rear, but overall it's not too difficult to maneuver. It's quite a normally shaped car, and the long bonnet is easy enough to judge where the endpoints are, so not so bad. As for safety, it's got a lot more kit than you might have expected. At $53,000, in fact, it's got stacks of kit. So you've got AEB with daytime and nighttime pedestrian detection, daytime cyclist detection, and you've also got a junction AEB functionality, which is great. Something you don't see too much on even the newest cars, so it's great to see Kia rolling that out on a car like the Stinger. Upgrading to the more expensive GT line and GT, you do also get a blind spot monitoring system with a safe exit warning, which is something that they've kind of, developed from Audi's sort of ideas on the A4, and that's a really great thing to include on a car that's going to be used by a family. So yeah, it's a pretty safe vehicle. You've obviously got adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist, both of which work quite well on this car, especially given the price. So the Stinger then, even in 200S form, now feels like a very complete vehicle. Although, as you've heard, I would definitely opt for the V6 because it just needs that little bit more power and a little bit more character. With that V6 installed up front, I think this would be a really sweet car and a really great alternative to the usual family carrying SUV. So, what do we think of the Kia Stinger here at Chasing Cars? Well, it retains all the good things about it, that form factor and the excellent space on offer, and this base model feels a much more complete package after its 2021 updates, even considering that slight price increase. So we really love the Stinger. We really love rear-wheel drive sedans, or hatchbacks in this case, and think it's a great package to carry your family and a nice alternative to an SUV, but perhaps it needs that 6-cylinder engine to truly shine. You can let me know what you think in the comments section down below. While you're down there, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe and that bell icon. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.